hockey fans, and welcome to part 3 as we continue to look at the amazing career of the man known as the Big M, Frank Mahovlich. I have returned indeed after a little bit of a hiatus, but for those who have yet to watch part 1 and 2, the links are in the description, so check them out right now. But for those who know where we are, let's have a quick recap. Where we left off, as Frank has now played 13 NHL seasons. In part 1, we covered his rise to stardom as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, collecting 3 Stanley Cups, setting franchise records, winning some awards despite fickle fans, an overbearing media circle, and a tyrant of a coach. In part 2, we covered his final days in Toronto, dramatic decline after winning his 4th Stanley Cup, and then the subsequent trade to Detroit, where he's now played 3 seasons, 2 of them full seasons. The latter of which he has set some career highs, and is playing in some of the best hockey of his career, helping a stagnant Red Wings team make the playoffs in 1970. Frank was at his peak, and Motown was loving him. He was on a high in Detroit after the drama in Toronto, and we start this video as he's about to enter his 4th season overall in Detroit. He formed a legendary line with Gordie Howe and Alex Delvecchio, and they were developing some new stars up front such as Gary Younger, who's coming off a 42-goal season, and Pete Stemkowski. On defense, they were led by former Leafs and longtime teammates of Frank's, Bob Bond and all-star Carl Brewer, as well as the awesome Gary Bergman. And at goal, Roy Edwards and promising rookie by the name of Jim Rutherford. And there are high hopes for this team, but there are a few problems that they have to encounter. Carl Brewer will be out of action for the foreseeable future due to lingering knee problems. They've hindered the star defenseman indeed, and goalie Roger Crozier was now part of the expansion Buffalo Sabres. Gordie Howe is very unhappy with the club, realizing how he was getting shafted for money. And Sid Abel went back to being general manager of the club, but even soon he would, start to make decisions that were not good for this team at all, including the hiring of Ned Harkness as the new head coach. Now, Harkness did have a great deal of success in many NCAA programs, coaching RPI in New York as well as Cornell University. However, this guy clearly went to the Eddie Shore School of Coaching without realizing it's 1970. Coaches are supposed to be hard-nosed and tough sometimes, granted, even to this day, but they're also supposed to evolve with the times and do what's best for their team, not what's best for necessarily them. Harkness is the type of guy that inspired Mark Metcalf's character in Twisted Sister video for We're Not Gonna Take It. Along with the dark cloud beginning to slowly descend on Detroit, the league is changing. We see Frank join the NHL during the run of the original 6 in 1967. It doubled in size to 12. And now with the Vancouver Canucks and Buffalo Sabres about to enter the league, making it 14 teams, the NHL's schedule is now increased by 2 games up to 78 to now be played in this season. 4 Stanley Cup appearances between them, not 1 win. Cool logos though. But anyway, I digress. Also, they joined the East Division with 5 of the original 6 teams, while the Hawks moved to the West. In 1971, the 70-71 season, Frank Mahovlich has pretty much already carved out a Hall of Fame career for himself as he enters the 14th NHL season. But with his longtime ally Carl Brewer, it won't be easy. And of course, the House of Harkness rules. He didn't like long hair, dang them dirty hippies. My guess is he heard them hippie kids listen to their Bo Diddley and Bill Haley devil music records. Oh, he had strict rules about drinking liquor and making phone calls. Yes, he got wind from that damn kid in Brantford named Alexander who was inventing this concoction that lets people talk not in person. Them kids, I say. Oh man, I can just picture this guy making Frank beg for Punch and Line to coach him again. But regardless, the Wings do have a lot of talent. They're coming off one of their best regular seasons in franchise history. Let's see what they can do and what our hero can do to help the situation. Frank Overwood missed 4 games in October due to some injury issues, but still played well, having 5 points in 6 games and was a +4. He had a goal and a helper in a tie with the Habs, and did the same in an upset over the defending Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins. The Wings, however, overall were not looking all that great. In November, Frank was playing well, but the Harkness was more concerned about giving the team sobriety tests rather than actually garnering momentum. Frank had 2 goals against former team Toronto in a loss. After going pointless in a loss to the Blackhawks, he would notch 1 assist in each of the 4 of the next 6 games. And yeah, in a big win over young Bobby Clark and the growing Flyers squad, he had a great night with 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. He then had a goal and a helper in the very next game against the expansion Vancouver Canucks, and did the same against the Habs on November 29th, scoring the game winner to boot. He had 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points in 12 games. And the team got rid of Bob Bond, who would end up finishing his career back in Toronto, while Pete Stemkowski was traded to the Rangers for Larry Brown, who would end up getting traded back to the Rangers later this season. Stemkowski would play nearly 500 games in New York. Can't blame this one on Nasty Ned, though. Sid Abel was starting to lose it. By December, however, the morale on the team was horrible, and the players hated Harkness' strategy, feeling it didn't make sense. Shorter shifts, which some may argue has worked in the past, but it isn't. This Red Wings team is not winning as much as they are losing. You see, that's kind of a problem. And hey, Gordy, get rid of those sideburns! Frank was still staying steady despite the drama. 4 goals, 6 assists for 10 points in 12 games in December. The Wings, however, got worse. By the end of the month, they were 11, 20, and 4. Yikes. And by the time the new year rolled around, Sid Abel finally snapped out of it and admitted, hell yeah, we messed up bad. Granted, Abel wasn't helping matters, but he knew Harkness had to go. Say what we may about Punch Imlach, but the man had a proven track record of success despite all his faults. But Harkness would cut off his nose, eyes, and mouth and ears to spite his face. But there was a problem. Team owner of the last 17 years and resident member of the original Six Crooks Club, Bruce Norris, liked Harkness and overruled Sid Abel when he wanted to fire him. Abel was furious with this, as was the team. The Wings would lose 13-0 to Toronto on January 2nd. A complete embarrassment. Harkness would be fired after something like that. No, he was actually promoted as the general manager of the team. That Sid Abel was fired just like that. Assistant Doug Barkley would take over coaching duties of the team. In the midst of this BS in Detroit, they were hosting the expansion Buffalo Sabres on January 9th. The team was led by their rookie sensation, Gilbert Perreault. But guess who their coach and GM was? Punch Imlach. Yes, the very man who pretty much drove Frank to the brink of insanity and pretty much out of Toronto. It was a tight game. Less than 5 minutes in, Frank set up Gordie Howe for a goal in the Wings, and they led 2-0 after 2 periods. The Sabres got one back, however, with 2:13 on a power play. Alex to Gordie to Frank. The Wings lead 3-1. The Sabres got one back shortly after, but Frank is credited with the game winner, and the Wings went 3-2. It was Frank Mahovlich's 14th goal of the year, and would be his last as a Detroit Red Wing. On January 10, 1971, the Red Wings hosted the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was Frank's 918th career NHL game, and against his former team, no less. The Wings would lose 3-2. Frank was pointless and got into a scrap with young Toronto defenseman Rick Lee, and Ned Harkness decided it was time to get rid of the players who were a, quote, threat to him. So on January 13, 1971, Montreal Canadiens general manager Sam Pollock did what he does best, and that makes the dumbest GMs look even dumber, as he traded to obtain Frank Mahovlich. Mickey Redmond, Guy Charon, and Bill Collins were all sent to the Wings in exchange for the Big M. Traitor Sam, you scoundrel you did it again. Okay, look, Collins was okay, had a couple decent seasons in the NHL. Redmond was actually really talented and ended up being a scoring sensation, and actually would have end up with a 42-goal season, then broke Frank's franchise record of goals in a season for the Red Wings, with becoming a 2-time 50-goal scorer, but sadly injuries forced him to retire at the age of 28 due to a bad back. Charon, he was talented too, but was quite literally the unluckiest talent in NHL history. Just Google his playoff stats. But despite all this, they weren't worth the value of Frank Mahovlich at this point. But either way, Frank's time in Detroit was done. His final season with the club, he had 14 goals, 18 assists for 32 points in 35 games, still very highly productive. And was, again, also great with that superstar line with Del Vecchio, who set up Frank 11 times, all but 3 of his goals. And they also collaborated on 7 assists and worked together to produce 20 goals overall. He set up Gordie Howe 7 times, and he, along with Mr. Hockey, produced 11 goals together. And Frank also worked well with Tom Webster, who would end up being the team's leading scorer that year. It's a shame after leaving Toronto behind, poor Frank Mahovlich teamed up with legends such as DeValchio and Howe to form a dominant forward line and be somewhere that he's valued and treated much better, only for the joy to end with the snap of Ned Harkness' stubby little fingers. Frank still had a lot to offer. Again, 32 points, 35 games, he was a +4. And Imlach may have gone a step too far, but Harkness was simply drunk on power and stuck in his ways without caring about his players. Thankfully, the suffering for Frank here was very short-lived and pretty much finished before it could truly start. Frank spent 4 seasons in Detroit, 2 of them again full seasons, and had some of the best years of his career. His 2 full seasons resulted in 2 second-team All-Star selections, 2 NHL All-Star games, including becoming the first 2-time All-Star Game MVP in 1969. He had a career best and set a team record 49 goals in 1968-69, and led the Wings to one of their best regular seasons ever, and got them back to the playoffs in 1970. He led the league in even strength goals in 68-69, the second time in his career and the first time in 8 years. He was in the top 10 the following year and was this partial year in Detroit after the trade in 68 as well. He was also the top 10 in power play goals, finished 5th in plus minus in 1969. It was a very impressive plus 65 during his entire time in Detroit, now that it's an official stat. Frank was gone from Toronto and regained his confidence and played at his absolute best, but thankfully he was on a lifeboat jumping off a sinking ship that was sailing to Montreal. Again, a good free ride, if I say so myself. But hey, 108 goals, 88 assists, 196 points in 198 games he played in Detroit. And that short-lived yet mega-star line was amazing and dazzled fans in the Motor City. How Delvecchio Mahovlich has been talked about in Detroit for years. He escaped the microscope at Toronto and did really well in Motown, and now he heads to Montreal. He's back in a market, however, he'll be under a very watchful eye. So now we usher in a new era for Frank Mahovlich, now 33 years old, but still playing in excellent peak form. But Montreal's media and their fans could be as vicious, sometimes even more so than Toronto. Frank, of course, has been on the opposition of the Habs on several occasions on the big stage. In 63 and 64, the Leafs beat the Habs in playoff semifinals. Then the Habs beat them in 65 and 66. The Leafs won the rubber match of their infamous Stanley Cup in 1967. Frank was there for all of it. And Montreal would recover, however, and win the Cup in 68 and 69. But, to the shock of many, missed the playoffs in the 1969-70 season, even though they had 92 points. It seemed to destroy their morale a little bit, but when Frank joined the team, the Habs were 19, 13, and 8, and they were looking pretty good, but not great, or dominant like we were used to seeing. But either way, they didn't have a tyrant of a coach, and were actually led by someone Frank thought very highly of, Al McNeil, who was briefly a former teammate of Frank's in Toronto. Now, Al was only 35 years old, really young for a coach, but he replaced Claude Ruel, who was also quite young himself, who resigned earlier in the season. But he did have a rough relationship with some veteran players, but overall was trying his best with this club. The man steering the ship from above was General Manager Sam Pollock, who to this day is one of the most brilliant minds hockey has ever seen, and maybe one of the best GMs in all of pro sports. And this Habs team still had a plethora of stacked talent. They were led by their captain, the gentle giant, the man known as Jean Béliveau, in his 18th full season. 9 Stanley Cups, one of the all-time greats, playing in his final season. Henri Richard was in his 16th NHL season, 9 Stanley Cups as well, a great leader despite his statistical decline. Speedy winger Yvan Cournoyer, 4 Stanley Cups, still in the prime of his career. Jacques Lemaire, a clutch scoring forward, 2 Stanley Cups, really just starting to emerge as a star. That's 4 Hall of Famers alone up front. And he also had Frank's brother, Pete Mahovlich, who's having a breakout year as he finally found his groove in Montreal. Who else? Well, they had a very young Marc Tardif, former first overall pick rookie Ray Jeannot, veteran tough man and respected leader John Ferguson, and a veteran role player in Claude Larose, and checker Leon Rochefort. Oh boy, this defense, veteran and former Norris Trophy winner Jacques Laperriere, youngsters Cher Savard and Guy Lapointe, that's 3 future Hall of Famers. Of course, the grossly underappreciated J.C. Tremblay, and the hard-nosed and tough Terry Harper. And goal, a man Frank and his Leafs took apart 4 years prior, Rogie Vachon, and reliable backup Phil Meyer. And Coach McNeil knew how to utilize Frank. Put him on another megastar line, have him working with Béliveau and Cournoyer, and a few others here and there. On January 14, 1971, on the road against the growing Minnesota North Stars team, Frank made his debut as a member of the Montreal Canadiens. He was set up by Cournoyer and Harper for his 405th career goal, his 15th of the year and first as a Hab, but Montreal would blow a 3-0 lead and have to settle for a tie. Frank then made his debut at the Montreal Forum as a member of the Canadiens, and the fans seemed very welcoming, as they hosted a monster Boston Bruins team on January 16th. Frank set up 2 Yvan Cournoyer goals as the Habs scored a huge 4-2 win against their hated rivals from Beantown, and Frank was off to a very good start in Montreal. And then the very next game, he scored the opening goal and will be a 4-4 tie with expansion Buffalo. Then the NHL All-Star game had arrived. Now, to be fair, Frank had already been selected to play while he was still in Detroit, but either way, he was still able to play because they were still in the same division as Montreal. Frank joined his new teammates, brother Pete Mahovlich playing in his first All-Star game, while Yvan Cournoyer played in his second, J.C. Tremblay played in his 6th. For Frank, this was his 12th overall and 12th straight. Frank's former teammates, Gordie Howe of the Wings, Dave Keon of the Leafs, were both there as well. But the West would win this one 2-1. The rest of January, went pretty well for Frank, as he scored a goal each of the next 2 games, then had a goal and a helper as the Habs throttled his former team, the Detroit Red Wings, at the Forum, 2 assists in a win over the Blues, then a goal and assist in a loss to the Leafs. Frank's first 9 games at Montreal saw him notch 12 points. Very impressive. In February, Frank was fully adjusted to Montreal, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points, 12 games, and a monster +8. A goal and a helper and a dominant win over the Stars, and the Habs were red hot. They dominated the Hawks 7-1 on the 20th, and Frank had 2 helpers. And he had the same against the California Golden Seals. He also scored a game-winning goal in a win over the Blues. In March, Frank was riding high on La Belle Province, 9 goals, 9 assists, 18 points in 17 games. He returned to Detroit on March 7, 1971, and actually got a pretty nice ovation in his return, with a few scattered jeers, of course, and scored 2 goals against his pathetic-looking former team. He scored another 2 goals, this time at home against the Leafs. Frank scored a shorthanded goal and a game winner against the Flyers in a win, and in an embarrassing 9-2 obliteration over the Red Wings at home on Hockey Night in Canada, Frank set up 2 goals for Beliveau and 1 each for Tremblay and LaRose, and scored his 30th goal of the year in a tight 2-1 win over the Hawks, his 3rd straight season, and 7th time in his overall career he reached 30 goals. The Montreal Canadiens finished 42, 23, and 13 for 97 points, which was actually only good enough for 3rd place in the East Division, but regardless, still good enough for a postseason berth, as now it's playoff time. Oh boy. The Habs' return to the playoffs is not looking good, standing in their way. Defending Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins. This is one of the most dominant teams in NHL history. Pro hockey history at this point. A psychotic record. 57 wins, 14 losses, 7 ties for 121 points. 57 wins, NHL record. 121 points, NHL record. 399 overall goals, just 1 short of 400. Yep, NHL record. Head coach Tom Johnson put together a system that seemed just close to perfect as you can get. The Habs went 1-5 against Boston this season, not good at all. And to make things worse, the Habs in goal are going with an unheralded rookie who only has 6 games of NHL experience, a fella by the name of Ken Dryden. The Montreal media was calling for McNeil's head on this one. And let's take a closer look as to why this Bruins team is so incredible. Well, let's start with Phil Esposito, shall we? Let's see. NHL record, 76 goals, smashing Bobby Hull's record of 58, 152 points, NHL record. So this clearly gives him his 2nd scoring title. He won the first ever Pearson Trophy as NHLPA Choice for MVP, and now known to this day as the Ted Lindsay Award. First team All-Star 3rd straight year, and runner-up. Yes, he didn't even win the Hart Trophy as league MVP. What possible reason could voters have to make him 2nd? His teammate was defenseman and phenom sensation Bobby Orr, who just set NHL records for assists in the season with 102, points by defenseman with 139, which as of 2023 still stands. He was 2nd in league scoring, so yeah, he won his 2nd straight Hart Trophy, 4th straight Norris Trophy, which pretty much didn't leave his house for the better part of a decade in his career. Oh, NHL record plus 124, and as of 2023, he still stands. And the fact that he was changing the game of hockey as we know it, so yeah, I can see why he still beat a 76-goal scorer for MVP. Things can't get any better? Think again. Ageless wonder, 35-year-old John Busick in his 16th NHL season had stuck with the Bruins through and through for these terrible years at 51 goals, 65 assists, 116 points, all career highs, 3rd in league scoring. First team All-Star for the first time, a Lady Byng Trophy winner for excellence in sportsmanship. The Chief was in peak form and had become the oldest player in NHL history to reach 50 goals in a season for the first time. Think it can't get any better? Think again. 4th in league scoring was Big Ken Hodge, 43 goals, 62 assists, 105 points, and he was also a first-team All-Star for the very first time. And joining them, the highly talented Wayne Cashman, veteran John McKenzie, and the always consistent Fred Stanfield. They were all in the top 10 among league scorers. Also front, you had the very popular Derek Sanderson, producing heavily, Wayne Carlton, Ed Westfall, Don Marcotte, and they were doing some great things for the Bruins. Joining over on defense, the Smith boys, Dallas and Rick, no relation. Dallas and Rick, I should say, easy for me to say. Terrible Ted Green, and tough Don Ori. In net, the man with the stitches on his mask, Jerry Cheevers, an aggressive goaltender who knew defense was more than just stopping pucks. 27, 8-5 record, and a huge 918 save percentage, and backing him up was the seasoned vet Eddie Johnston, who had a career-high 30 wins and 4 shutouts. Frank might as well be polishing off his golf clubs, but either way, here we go, I guess. Game 1, Boston Garden. Frank played a bad game, taking a stupid misconduct penalty, had just 1 shot on goal, and despite the unknown Dryden playing well in net, the Habs lose 3-1. Game 2, it's embarrassing. The Boston Bruins fans are laughing at Dryden as the Bruins led 5-1 in the second period. Henry Richard closed the gap to 5-2, but with 1 period to play, definitely much will come out of it. The Habs exploded in the third period. Beliveau at 39 was playing like he was 29 again. The Habs took a 6-5 lead, 4:37 to play, but with 1:20 to play. Phil Roberto to Frank Mahovlich, 24th playoff goal of his career. The Habs stunned the Bruins 7-5. Frank played, of course, much better and more determined in this game. He was in Johnston's face all night. Habs tied the series 1-1. Game 3 at the Montreal Forum, the Bruins led 1-0 after 1, but 4:04 to the second period. Laperriere finds the Big M, who scores a goal. The full crowd cheers so loud, and the Habs have tied it. 8 minutes later, Brother Pete would set up Laperriere for a goal. The Habs led 2-1 after 2. And nearly 4 minutes into the second, Henry Richard uses those skills that earn him all them Stanley Cup rings and finds Frank the Big M, makes Cheever Stitches split open on his mask. His second goal of the game. The Habs win 3-1. They take a 2-1 series lead. The playoff experience from our hero is shining through, as well as the experience of his teammates. This is insane. Game 4, 5:30 into the game. Power play. Jacques Lem to Jacques Lap to Frank M. The Habs strike first, but that's as good as it would get. Mahovlich didn't play well the rest of the way. Orr's hat trick and Espo's 3 assists tied the series at 2 games. We're going back to Beantown. Maybe reality has set in. Game 5, Boston Garden, it's a disaster. Dryden is literally left out to dry as the Bruins fire more shots than the weekend bar hoppers on $2 tequila night. And while Frank gets his 5th goal of the series, reality indeed is truly coming to fruition. The Habs are on the verge of elimination. The Bruins take Game 5, 7-3. Game 6, back at the Montreal Forum on the verge of elimination, but the Habs aren't losing focus. The game was tied 2-2 in the second. When on a power play, J.C. Tremblay controls the situation while the Big M sees Lemaire at center and sets him up. He fires it home. The Habs lead 3-2. Habs led 4-2 in the third period, where the Big M sees the pocket rocket on Henry Richard, ready for takeoff, and he gets it to him, and Henry scores. Yes, the Habs led 5-2, and they dish it right back to the Bruins. A stunning 8-3 win. Our hero with 2 helpers coming up big in the clutch. Nobody can believe it. We're going to Game 7. Now, Frank has been in 3 7-game situations before and has won all of them. Frank's clutch heroics are going to be needed. Game 7, Boston Gardens. The fans in Beantown are ready for this fluke to end. Hodge scored early for the Bruins, but as the first period wound down, Lemaire comes in with the goal. And, oh, wait a minute, comes in on goal. Frank Mahovlich, who scores it, though. The game is tied, and nearly 3 minutes later, Ray Jeannoul gives the Habs the lead. In the second period, it's a tight-knit affair. Ken Dryden is playing like he's Terry Sawchuk in net. And as the frame is getting closer to ending, the duo of Lemaire and Mahovlich are in control. They get it back to Tremblay, who slaps it home. The Habs led 3-1 after 2 period. Is it really going to happen? 14 seconds into the third, Lemaire to Mahovlich. Frank scores his second goal of the game. His 3rd point of the night, 4-1 Habs. However, less than a minute later, Busick kept the Bruins in it, but Dryden stood firm the rest of the way. The Bruins were pressing and pressing, but the clock is winding down. Despite how good this Habs team really is, this is going to be a monster upset. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Montreal Canadiens have beaten the most dominant regular season club in NHL history at this point. Frank was incredible. 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points in those 7 games. Frank's playoff experience was paying off. He led the Habs in scoring in this series, and this may have been the best series of hockey he ever played. And once again, like he has in the past, comes up huge in the clutch with an amazing Game 7 performance, but was a workhorse for Montreal game in and game out despite a rough start. This is also the first playoff series win for Frank since the Stanley Cup in 1967 with the Leafs. But the Habs are moving on to the semifinals. Playoff format this year was the winner of the East won the 3-seed series facing the winner of the West 2-4-seed series. Yeah, strange, whatever. And standing in the way of the Habs, a team that's not supposed to be there, pulling off an upset of their own, the Minnesota North Stars. With their 28-34-16 record, they were 4th in the West and got that final playoff spot. They were coached by Jack Gordon, who was doing everything he could with this club, and indeed he managed to help the Stars shock the 3-time defending West champions St. Louis Blues in 6 games. The Habs won the season series, 3-1-2 record, but considering what they just did at Boston, we know nothing is certain come playoff time. The Stars were led by the man who was deemed the first legend and icon of this club, and that was Bill Goldsworthy. He notched his 2nd straight 30-goal season, had 34 goals, 31 assists for 65 points, was 4th in game-winning goals, 8th in even-strength goals, excelling in places where our hero does. He even got a vote for the Hart Trophy as league MVP. Danny Grant also achieved 34 goals, and he has been one of the best Stars players in the last 3 seasons. It was a great power play for us, and was tied for 5th in the league in power play goals, and played in his 3rd straight NHL All-Star game this year. The breakout star, however, was Calder Trophy runner-up Jude Drouin, who would love nothing more than to stick it to the team that initially drafted him back in 1966, but gave up on him. He was the team's leading scorer with 68 points, had 52 assists, and was proving to be a superb playmaking setup man. Joining this forward core was another up-and-coming star in J.P. Parise, veteran Murray Oliver, Charlie Burns, former Habs star Bobby Russo brings playoff depth and experience to them as well. On defense, another former Habs star, Ted Harris, who brings grit and toughness to the blue line, even scored a vote for the Hart Trophy himself. Joining him was reliable veteran Doug Mons, Lou Nanne, Tom Reed, Fred Barrett, and Bad Barry Gibbs. And in goal, veteran journeyman Cesar Maniaga, who had a pretty good 19-5-6 record and an excellent .914 save percentage. 5 shutouts, however, is what stood out the most. And backing him up was another former Hab with 4 Stanley Cups, the Gumper, Gump Worsley. So here we go. Game 1 at the Montreal Forum. They host the first ever postseason meeting between these two clubs. And the game was tied 1-1 in the second period. And then a Big M gets it to the pocket rocket to Lemaire. It's 2-1. The Habs lead 3-1 as the second period is winding down. It's Jacques Lapp to Frank M to Jacques Lem. Yes, who scored a hat trick. The Habs led 4-1 after 2, leading 6-2 in the third period. And Terry Harper sends in Frank Mahovlich, like he has many times in his career, terrorizing the Gumper, and the Habs win this one emphatically 7-2. 3 points, Frank staying hot in this postseason. Game 2, however, was a shocking disaster. Frank plays poorly, the Habs as a whole do, and lose 6-3, thanks to a huge game from Danny Grant and Maniago's return in net. The Stars tie the series. Then we head to the land of the Thousand Lakes for Game 3, and our hero shakes off the game before, and wow, Oliver gave the Stars an early lead but then 136 later, it's Lemaire to Mahovlich. He shoots, he scores! And then later in the period, Henry and Frank set up Jacques Lemaire. Oh yeah, 2-1 Habs after 1. After taking a 3-1 lead on a power play, Frank controls it, goes to Cournoyer, then gets it to Tremblay, who scores a goal, 4-1 Montreal. And just over 3 minutes later, Mahovlich to Harper to Laperriere, 5-1 lead. The Habs win this one 6-3, 4 points for Frank Mahovlich. Wow. The Montreal media is loving the Big M. And the Habs take a 2-1 series lead, but then Game 4 is different. Veteran Murray Oliver comes up peak for the Stars, and Maniago is playing in net, and they take it 5-2. Frank doesn't play necessarily bad here, he just wasn't able to get things going, but this series is tied. Are the Habs on the verge of being the victim of an upset now? Well, some are thinking about it. But Game 5 back in Montreal, they are pretty much flawless. They wreck Maniago in the third period. Frank set up by Lemaire to get his 10th goal of the playoffs. The Habs dominate this one 6-1. Our heroes just 1 win away from returning to the Stanley Cup final. Game 6 in Minnesota, Dryden and Maniago put on a show in net. The Stars, however, were leading 1-0. Then on a power play, Frank, JC, Ivan, the latter of the 3, scores the goal. We are tied. The Habs led 3-2 after 2, and Dryden was holding them in, clinging on to the 1-goal lead. And again, people are going crazy back in La Belle Province. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Big M is going back to the Stanley Cup final for the 7th time in his career, and for the first time since 1967, and for the first time he'll be playing in a cup final not as a Toronto Maple Leaf. The Habs are making their 6th finals appearance in 7 seasons. Frank, again, was awesome here, playing incredible playoff hockey. 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points in 6 games, was a +2, and incredible performances in games 1 and 3 in this series. Considering how this season started, Frank's at a point where many thought he wouldn't be. Well, maybe even he didn't think so. But here we go. I mean, our hero has been here before. He has 4 Stanley Cup wins and has made 6 appearances. Does not mean he wants any less. That's just how it was. It's been a little while since the glory in Toronto. Some of it he didn't even really get to enjoy like he wanted to. But after his departure from the 416 and the false hope in Motown, but now in Montreal, Frank's a step away from a return to glory. He has been the underdog before, especially in his last cup in 1967. Well, he has tasted the drink from the cup. The Habs have many times as well. The thing is, this Habs legends are now in a role that they've never really played in many years. That's being the underdog. The 1971 Stanley Cup Final. The Montreal Canadiens, well, not gross underdogs this time like they were against Boston, are still facing a favored Chicago Blackhawks team. The Hawks finished 49-20-9 for 107 points, their best season ever. And hey, Billy Ray is still coaching the team, and he has yet to win the big one as their bench boss, despite coming close. But after several playoff heartbreaks, including the year prior against Boston, this Blackhawks team is ready to win the big one. However, the two teams split the season series 3 wins apiece. But many experts and pundits said that despite Montreal bouncing Boston, they may be exhausted from that series, plus the unexpected fight the Stars gave them. The Hawks swept out the Flyers, but it took them 7 games themselves to take the Rangers out. But much like parts 1 and 2, many of the elements that made Chicago great, of course, includes their 2 huge stars, Stan Mikita and Bobby Hull. First, Mikita, another excellent season, 24 goals, 48 assists, 72 points, still one of the best centers in the game, and also a determined leader. He played in his 5th NHL All-Star game and was moving up the all-time scoring leaders list in NHL history. Bobby Hull, 96 points, 5th in scoring behind the Boston 4, a finalist for the Hart Trophy, 4th in Lady Byng Trophy voting, try to figure that one out, and was a second-team All-Star. Mikita was in his 12th season, Hull was in his 14th, but much like our hero, they're not slowing down whatsoever. Bobby's brother Dennis Hull had a career year, 40 goals and 66 points. His goals were 5th best in the league, was 4th in even strength goals, was tied for 4th in game-winning goals, and played in his 2nd NHL All-Star game. Also, we had 20 goal scorers in this group, Pip Martin, Chico Mackey, and Frank's former Leafs teammate Jim Pappen. And they had a fantastic group of grinders and character players still, Cliff Coral, Jerry Pinder, Dan Maloney, and veteran Eric Nestorenko. Their defense was insanely good, however. First, Pat Stapleton. His plus 48 was 8th best in the league, had excellent offensive numbers with 51 points that included 44 assists, 2nd team All-Star for a 2nd time, 4th in Norris Trophy voting, and played in his 3rd NHL All-Star game. All the while, sophomore tough guy Keith Magnuson tied for 5th in Hart Trophy voting, and again led the league in penalty minutes. Bill White, a minor league journeyman for many years, found a spot with the LA Kings during the first expansion year. The Hawks signed him in a steal of a deal. His plus 51 was 7th best in the league. Also, Rick Foley, Doug Jarrett, and Paul Schmier pretty much stacked out of the blue line. And in goal, sophomore sensation Tony Esposito, 35, 14, and 6 record. 2.27 goals against average, 919 save percentage, 6 shutouts. He led the league in wins and was top 5 in all major categories. Still, it's amazing in net to see out. And again, got some votes for the Hart Trophy as league MVP. Can the Habs handle this team full of stars in depth? Sure, they have it themselves, but there are some out there who feel this Habs team is too old, especially up front. But either way, here we go. Game 1, a loud and excited Chicago Stadium is anxious for what's ahead. And what a game it was. Highly competitive as Dryden is a machine, Antonio is sharp in net. So much so it's 1-1 after regulation and we go to OT. Then, in the second OT, 1:11 in, Pappen wins it for the Hawks. Frank played well in the game. Game 2, the Hawks and the Habs were both showing the highest level of wanting it, playing to want it. But the Hawks were just looking a little bit better. Habs were down 4-2 in the 3rd period when Frank Mahovlich took a loose puck, went alone, he shoots, he scores! His 11th goal of these playoffs, but the Hawks would win it 5-3, and now the Habs find themselves down 2-0 in this series. Oh boy, game 3 at the Foreman. Frank really needs to step up and come up in a clutch. We've seen him do it when the chips were down several times throughout his career, but it could possibly get worse. If it looked bad, the Habs were down 2-0 after 1 period. The Foreman was dead silent, but the little M, Pete, put the Habs on the board in the 2nd. Then power play. The Roadrunner Ivan, Gentleman Jean, set up the big M known as Frank, and he scores. The game is tied. In the 3rd period, Cornway gave the Habs the lead, and then power play. Guy Lapointe, even back then in his young career, dangerous on the extra man advantage, and sees his man, and it's Frank Mahovlich. He shoots, he scores! His 2nd goal of the game. The Habs hang on to win 4-2, and Frank again really cranks it up in the clutch when it's direly needed. Game 4, the game was tied 1-1, and then the 1st period, and power play you say, Mahovlich to Cornway, to Beliveau. The Habs take a 2-1 lead, they lead 3-1 after 1, the 2nd period leading 4-2, and what a moment among brothers, the little M to the big M to Mimi, Ivan Cornway. Montreal wins 5-2, another huge game for Frank, getting the Habs back in the series as it's tied 2-2. Game 5, we're back in the Windy City, however, the night belonged to Tony Esposito. A 31 save shutout. Frank had 6 shots on goal. Now the Habs' dreams are 1 loss away from becoming a nightmare. Once again, can Frank do what he has done in Toronto many times, and what he has done in these playoffs, especially in this series? He's stepping up big when the Habs' backs are against the wall. Game 6, Papin, however, strikes first. But then, just over a minute later, it's Frank. It's Jean. It's Ivan, baby! We're tied 1-1. But the Forum would later grow silent, and they're down 3-2 after 2 periods, 20 minutes away from their season ending. Frank needs to do something, so of course, cue the two legends. 5-10 in. A great play. Jean Beliveau, ageless and with grace, sets up Frank Mahovlich, who shoots it home. The Forum erupts in joy. The game is tied, but then the Habs are killing the penalty. Frank gets the puck, clears it out, lands on the stick of Brother Heat, who scores. The Forum is shaking in joy. That is Frank's 27th playoff point, matching his jersey number, yes, and tying the record set by Phil Esposito just a year prior. Dryden holds them in the rest of the way. 3 points for Frank Mahovlich. What a performance, and again, does so in the backs against the wall. So here we go. Game 7. The atmosphere in Chicago Stadium is nuts. They fully believe the Hawks will win their first cup in 10 years. But remember, our hero has never lost a Game 7. Something that even Jean Beliveau and Henri Richard can't say. Here we go, and it looked bad. The Habs trail 2-0 as of the second period. It was beginning to wind down, but Lemaire caught Tony sleeping and got the Habs back in it. Then he intercepted a bad clearing attempt from Nestorenko and set up Henri Richard for a goal. It's 2-2 after 2 periods. The excitement is huge. Early in the third period, Henri Richard scores a very memorable goal, and the Habs lead 3-2. Dryden is a freaking octopus in that net, with all those limbs just stopping every puck that comes at him. Time is winding down. 1 minute to go. The miracle run is about to commence, but Chicago is pressing. 30 seconds. Is it really going to happen? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Hawks make a long shot. Dryden has it. 0. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Stanley Cup number 5. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, okay, sorry. The Montreal Canadiens have done it. Frank Mahovlich is a Stanley Cup champion once again and gets to share the joy with Brother Peter. Oh man, yes indeed. He'll taste a sweet nectar of victory from Lord Stanley's mug for the first time, but for Frank, it's time number 5, baby. Yes, he was incredible in these finals. This is by far his best finals play. Yeah, 8 points, 4 notches, 4 apples, each all as impressive. But it was his abilities to rise to the occasion when things looked bad. He did it in Games 3 and 4, did it again in Game 6, keeping the Habs in the series. No doubt this one had to be just a little bit extra sweet for him. Frank Mahovlich tied Phil Esposito's record on 27 playoff points and led the postseason with his 14 goals and 13 assists. And it really goes to show the savvy of our hero, cool under pressure and ready to deliver when needed the most. However, believe it or not, Frank did not win the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. As a matter of fact, it went to goaltender Ken Dryden, and again was very well deserved. But either way, Frank's impactful presence on the Habs meant he's going to be an important part of this team going forward. Frank's first season in Montreal saw him score 17 goals, 24 assists for 41 points in the 38 games he played for the Habs after the trade from Detroit. An immediate showing in his new uniform. And how great is it? Well, Frank got to get together with another icon, indeed in Jean Beliveau, who is Montreal's biggest icon, probably next to the Rocket, and in his final season. And watch Beliveau go as he and Frank teamed up for 17 goals together. Jean was tied with Yvan Cournoyer for setting up 5 of Frank's 17 goals, close to a third. Then Frank returned the favor, setting up Jean 6 times. A little-known Phil Roberto, setting him up on a hot streak, 6 of his 14 goals that year. And then he teamed up with Jean for 6 assist collaborations. Frank had arrived in Habland. What a difference a trade makes. How great is it to leave a toxic situation behind before it can get worse for you, with your 5th Stanley Cup to cap it off. And getting there by teaming up with a competitive rival like Jean Beliveau, who you spent 14 years playing against, but then getting to pose for a picture of celebration with your younger brother who finally scratched and clawed his way to stardom and success. Oh yes, and tied an NHL record for points in a playoff season too. There are still a lot of people who even had success in their career that can only dream of something like that. Well, hey, Frank began the year with Detroit, a world of black and white where nothing was going his way and the team was faltering. It looked like he was being sucked into a tornado of drama, but landing in the land of Oz, or I mean Montreal, and opening the door and poof, it's all colorful. Indeed, he was still playing very well in Detroit, but adjusted extremely quick in Montreal, and his performance in these postseason was off the charts. The dire games again where the Habs needed everything their new acquisition could do, he brought it and more. Frank also averaged a point a game, finished the year +9, played in his 12th straight NHL All-Star game. Many wondered if Frank would slow down after this when it came to his career. So now Frank enters season number 15 and his first full season as a member of the Montreal Canadiens, and now has another Stanley Cup crown to defend. Indeed, Jean Beliveau retired after 18 glorious seasons with the Habs, and pretty much walked out of the Forum directly into the Hall of Fame. Henri Richard was named captain, but in a shocking move, speaking of Henri, coach Al McNeil was let go. Yes, the man has led his team to a cup, but since he can't get along with the new captain, who is practically royalty in Montreal at this point, he's gone. But he would go on to do great things for the Habs in their minor league system in Nova Scotia. And they now have to hire a new head coach. His name is Scotty Bowman. He guided the Blues to 3 straight Stanley Cup appearances. And hopefully this pans out. And the Habs, no matter how much success they had, they always plan for the future. That's why Sam Pollock knew the Seals would suck and goaded them into trading a first-round draft pick the year he knew Guy Lafleur was available to play pro hockey. And indeed, Guy Lafleur was drafted first overall by the Habs. Ken Dryden was now the team's #1 goalie and was able to play his first full year, and many felt the new Habs dynasty had arrived. Frank wasted no time. 2 goals against the Rotel, Gilbert Park, and Eddie as the New York Rangers, I should say, in a 4-4 tie. Frank, in just 1 game, looks more determined than ever to keep this team a winner. After another tie in a semifinal rematch with the Stars, he scored a goal as the Habs embarrassed Buffalo and scored another in a loss to the Rangers. Then the Habs went to Oakland to take on the Golden Seals, and just under 2 minutes in, Cournoyer, to Lemaire, to Frank Mahovlich, the Habs strike first. Second period, power play, and Frank takes the puck alone. He shoots, he scores! Mahovlich. And yes, the Habs lead 2-0, and later in the period, killing a penalty, Frank clears out to brother Pete, shorthanded goal. Habs led 3-0. The Seals got one back early in the third, but 1:23 later, Leperrier to Frank to the Roadrunner, Yvan Cournoyer. The Habs led 4-1. They won 4-2. Frank Mahovlich, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 big points, devastating on the power play, shorthanded and of course even strength. He was a machine early on this season. Could it get any better? How about a hat trick in the very next game? 2 days later in Vancouver, 2 goals set up by Lemaire, 1 set up by brother Pete. A huge 6-0 win over Canada's 3rd team. Poor Dunk Wilson was the victim. This was Frank's 12th hat trick of his career, first as a Montreal Canadien. Oh yes, he scored another goal against Boston 2 games later. And in 1 month, 10 games, 12 goals, adding 2 assists, 14 points, was a +5. Habs were looking good. In November, Frank cooled down a little, but was still very productive. 9 points in 12 games and a +4. Goal to helper against the Blues in a win. He did the same against Boston on the 7th in a tight 3-2 win, and scored a power play game winner. And he also had a goal and a helper in a win over Keon and the Leafs on the road. In December, he was on fire once again. First assist against the Kings as part of a 5-3 comeback win. And look at this, 4 assists in a big 7-0 home win against the Canucks. 2 to Lemaire, 1 to Harper, and the other to rookie Guy Lafleur. He then notched an assist on J.C. Tremblay's game winner against his former team, the Red Wings. Then he follows that up with 3 assists, all to Guy Lafleur, scoring what would be the first of his 19 career hat tricks. After the Habs win streak was broken up by the Flyers, Frank and the Habs bounced back on the road against the Kings, where he scored a goal, and followed that with 2 helpers and another dominant win over the lowly Canucks. Had another assist in a tie, yes, a tie against the Seals. Back home, Frank scored a shorthanded goal against the Leafs, which tied the game and helped the Habs to a 4-2 comeback win. Also assisted on Claude LaRossa's game winner. Montreal would then suffer an upset loss at the hands of the Penguins, and Frank getting an assist in a terrible outing against the Rangers, but overall ended the calendar year with a goal and a win over the Seals. 3 goals, 14 assists, 17 points, +10, 12 games! Oh boy. To be the new year in January, however, Frank suffered back-to-back losses against his former teams, the Leafs and Wings, scoring a goal in the former. Then scored a goal against the Canucks, and on Hockey Night in Canada was part of the Habs royally crowning the Kings in a 10-2 easy sail of a win. Frank had 3 assists and was named the game's 2nd star, helping out brother Pete twice and rookie Guy once. As former Habs goalie Paul Vachon is at the receiving end of it all for the LA Kings. He then followed that with 2 assists and a win over the Pens, assist another win over the sophomore Sabres, the goal on the road against those same Sabres, and 2 games later an assist and a loss to the Bruins. The very next game against the Pittsburgh Penguins on January 23, 1972, Frank Mahovlich plays in his 1,000th career NHL games. a journey that began on March 20th, 1957 at Maple Leaf Gardens, culminated nearly 15 years later. Back then, not many players had reached 1,000 games due to less games on NHL schedules, of course, but he joins the likes of many former teammates, including Gordie Howe, Alex Delvecchio, George Armstrong, Tim Horton, Jean Beliveau, and Red Kelly, to name a few who have reached the mark at this point, and also current teammate Henry Richard has done the same thing. Speaking of Tim Horton, oddly enough, he was playing for the Penguins in this very game. It was on the ice as Frank's teammate during that very first game 15 years prior. Then came the NHL All-Star Game, and you guessed it, Frank was there, as the midseason showcase would take place on January 25th, 1972 at the Met Center in Minnesota. His 13th overall and consecutive appearance. Joining him in this outing was rookie Ken Dryden, Yvan Cournoyer, J.C. Tremblay, and playing in the 7th, I might add. But Frank didn't register any points, but the East won at 3-2. Back to business on January 27, 1972. Frank was incredible against the Minnesota North Stars with, a hat trick and an assist, 4 points. However, was named just the second star of the game as Lou Nanne of the Stars did the same thing. The Habs lost them in this outing either way. Frank's epic season continues. He ended the month scoring a goal in a shutout win over former teammate Gary Younger in a struggling St. Louis Blues squad. He finished January with 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points in 12 games. And then look at this. 6 goals, 15 assists, 21 points. A truly incredible plus 17 in just 14 games in February. It started with a goal and a helper in a win over the Blues, and then on February 10th, in a game against Makita, Hull, and the high-powered Blackhawks, the Habs followed them 7-1 in the Stanley Cup rematch. Frank assisted on another hat trick for rookie Guy Lafleur, plus a goal to brother Pete, and then both Pete and Guy assisted on Frank's goal. 5-point night for our hero. First star honors. Huge ovation from Habs fans in attendance at the Forum that night. What more can you say? Then 2 days later, in a thrilling game against the Kings, Frank assisted on Yvan Cournoyer's opening goal of the game, and what resulted later was a thrilling game with a thrilling ending, and with 22 seconds left, Frank took another feed from brother Pete and set up Guy for the game winner, sending the Forum into a frenzy. Just over a week later, he scored 2 goals in a shutout win over the Sabres, including his 30th of the year. And what a way to end the month, a goal and 2 helpers over his former team, the Red Wings, who were fighting for a playoff spot at that point, but the Habs crushed them on that night. Frank set up Guy's Lapointe and Lafleur, as well as scoring a great individual effort, then scored the same the next day in a win over the Penguins. Oh my goodness. At this point of the season, just 1 month ago, 16 games total to play, Frank had 76 points. His career high in a season is still 84 back in 1960-61. After going pointless in a win over Buffalo to begin the month, he went on a 4-game point streak. 2 goals in a dominant win over the Canucks, then an assist in a shutout win against the Flyers, then a goal and assist against the Pens and scoring the game winner, and then an assist over the Blues in a win, which gave Frank 82 points in the season, just 2 away from tying, 3 from breaking his personal best. He went pointless in a tie with the Blackhawks, then on March 13th scores a game-winning goal with 104 to play, putting him 83 points on the year. And then the date, March 15, 1972, the building, who Frank knew like the back of his hand, Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, and of course the opposition is the Leafs, who are in a battle for the final playoff spot in the East, along with Frank's other former team, Detroit. On a power play, midway through the first period, Tremblay controls, Frank takes over, Lafleur scores, an apple for number 27, he ties his career high in season points. And as time is counting down to the period, another power play, Tardif to Lemaire, to the Big M, Frank Mahovlich sets his career high in points with 85, his highest total in 11 years. Oh my goodness, and also the Habs with 2-0 after 1, but despite setting the personal high, he wasn't done. In the second period, former teammate Bob Bond gets the Leafs in it, but on another power play, Tremblay up to Frank, no open forward, so he goes back to Lapointe, who slaps it home. Oh yes, from Lapointe. And the Habs lead 3-2 after 2. After Tardy got a goal in the third period with under 5 minutes to play. Lapointe to Ulta, Frank Mahovlich. 4-point night for our hero. 5-2 Montreal win. First star of the game. Frank gets a nice reception from Leaf fans. And what a night. He has set a personal best for points in this season. And fitting he makes it happen 11 years after his personal best year in a building where he notched most of those points. Oh, but he wasn't done. He had a goal and a helper against the Stars in a tight win, then taking on rookie Marcel Dion and the Red Wings. The Habs actually came up short of 7-6 loss, but Frank had 2 goals and assists for 3 points, and including his 40th and 41st goal of the year. And he has the 3rd time he's reached that mark, and then notched an assist against the Leafs. Frank will go pointless, however, in the following 3 games, as the Habs were on a puzzling 5-game winless streak. However, Montreal made April Fools of the dominant Bruins in a 6-2 win. Frank had a goal and a helper. That put him at 95 points, which ties him for the second best single season total in Canadiens history, with Boom Boom Jeffrey Allen's mark of 95 in 1960-61. The same year, oddly enough, Mahovlich had his previous career best season, statistically. The record is 96, held by Dickie Moore in 1958-59, and the Habs have one game left against the dominant Rangers club in Madison Square Garden. And just 54 seconds into the game, Frank, along with Ray Jeannot, helps it up Pete Mahovlich, and he ties the franchise record. There's lots of time. Habs actually score 5 more goals in a 26-5 win, but Frank would not notch any more points, but regardless, still ties the team record. The Habs finished 46, 16, and 16 for 108 points, but that was only good enough for third place again in the East. 1 point out of second with the Rangers, but either way, a fantastic season, and of course, it's play out. And in the Habs' way is indeed the team who finished a point ahead of them, the New York Rangers. For so many years, the boys from the Big Apple have been marred in mediocrity, despite bolstering such great players as Andy Bathgate, Comporsley, and Harry Howell, to name a few. But since the late 1960s, the Rangers have been emerging as a tried-and-true contender, an NHL powerhouse. Head coach, GM, and overall brilliant hockey mind, Emil the Cat Francis, worked tirelessly to make this team into what it is, and never gave up, and more importantly, never let up on them at this point. They had not won the Stanley Cup since 1940 and had the longest active slump in the NHL at this point. And the Habs only beat the Rangers once this season, going 1-3-2 against them, the win coming in the very final game I just mentioned. This team was led by arguably the most talented line in hockey at the time, and Jean Rattel was at the very core of it. The other gentleman, Jean, that is. A man of pure finesse and playmaking master. 46 goals, 63 assists, 109 points, third in league scoring, but the respect that he earned amongst his peers got him voted for the Lester B. Pearson Trophy Winner's Player's Choice for MVP, despite coming in 4th place for Hart Trophy voting. He also won the Lady Byng Trophy and earned his second team All-Star selection, and the best year of his already great 11-season career. Of course, his wingmen were every bit as good. Vic Hadfield, also in his 11th season, like Rattel, all spent with the Rangers, notched 50 goals, 56 assists, 106 points, and he was previously known more as a hard-nosed, sizable grinding forward who could score quite often, who was a tremendous leader. His previous career highs, however, were 26 goals and 40 assists for 66 points 3 years earlier. What a season he had, coming in 2nd in goals, 4th in points, 2nd team All-Star, 5th in Hart Trophy voting. How could it get any better? How about having Rod Gilbert on the right side in his 10th season, and along with his teammates on with the Rangers, and the fact that these three men excelled their play at this point in their career, 43 goals, 54 assists, 97 points, 5th in league scoring, completing a line chock full of depth and outright just pure talent. And while these were the pillars of the growth of this club, they also had team talents up front such as Walt Kitchuk, Bill Fairburn, former Hab Bobby Russo once again, a former teammate of Frank's both in Toronto and Detroit, Pete Stemkowski, and you had Ted Irvine as well as another former teammate, the other Big M, Bruce McGregor. And on defense, they were led by the great Brad Park. Tough, aggressive, and falling in the vein of scoring defensemen set forth by Bobby Orr. Park was 2nd in voting for the Norris Trophy, 2nd among defensemen in scoring, 2nd in plus-minus, got 4 votes for the Hart Trophy as league MVP, and is only 24 years old. Despite being in his 4th NHL season, he has taken command of this defense in an emphatic way. And a rock-solid blue line backing him up was Rod Sealing, Jim Nielsen, and Dale Rolfe. And in net, they had a lethal combo. First, you had Eddie Giacomin, who was a minor league star who finally got the call at the age of 26, and was key in this team's growth and emergence. His numbers, however, were down a fair bit from the year prior. Be that as it may, he won 24 games, and he's the man they're going with in this series. But Gilles Villemure had the best season. He was also winning 24 games, the 2nd in league in goals against average. The Habs took out 2 great teams last year. Can they do this again with just the Rangers? So here we go. Game 1, Madison Square Garden in New York. The Rangers defense is giving Eddie a lot of breathing room. The Habs stacked forward core can't seem to apply a lot of pressure. Dryden faces a lot of pressure. They trail 2-1 in the 3rd period, but 7:48 into the final frame, it's the little M to the flower to the big M. He ties the game, but 5 minutes later, Hatfield scored, but proved to be the game winner. The Rangers take Game 1. Game 2, the Habs open the scoring, and Frank gets it to Guy, and the Habs draw first blood. And that's as good as it would get. Frank played a terrible game, otherwise it was a -4. Habs lost 5-2. And I'll trail the series 2-0. Game 3, we shift to the form of Montreal, and as Eddie and Kenny are playing great in net, the defenses on both sides are excellent. It's scoreless first period. In the 2nd period, it's a power play, led by JC Tremblay, who gets to Pete who sets up older brother Frank. It's a tight game, but Tardif made it 2-0. The Habs will go hang on a win 2-1. They're still in this series. Game 4, however, it wasn't looking good. Frank again was not playing well, and the Habs trailed 4-2. But in the second, Tremblay gets it to Mahovlich, who gets it to the Roadrunner, and the Habs have life, and they trail by a goal, waking up the form. Habs tied the game in the third, but fell apart and lost 6-4. Our hero and his Les Habitants are on the verge of elimination. Game 5 back at MSG. It was a scoreless first period, as Eddie and Kenny are putting on a clinic. The latter channeling his brilliance from last year. Hatfield scored, but 2:29 later, it's Yvonne setting up Frank, his third goal of the series. The game is tied. Lower 6 forward Jimmy Roberts scores the game winner. Dryden is amazing. The Habs are still in it. Game 6 back in Montreal. It's still do or die. It was 2-2 after 2 periods, but Kachuk scored 29 seconds into the third period. The Habs are pressing, but Frank is being heavily contained. Habs pull Dryden for an extra attacker. They're going for that equalizer, but the clock is going down. Oh no, 5, come on, 4, give me a break. 3, please. 2, I'm begging you. 1, 0. Our hero's banner year comes to an end. The Rangers eliminate Montreal in 6 games. Frank had a dreadful game 2 and a couple other not-so-good games, but otherwise played okay in this series, but still nowhere near the presence he showed last year. He, along with Tardif and Lafleur, tied the team and led lead in scoring, but it was a -5. That was a team worse. The Rangers went on to sweep the Blackhawks, but lost the Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals in 6 games. Frank Mahovlich, however, was superb this season. 43 goals, 53 assists for a career high, 96 points, and the wealth was spread out very largely. First, Jacques Lemaire set out 12 of Frank's goals as the centerman built his career up, bringing out the best in wingers, be it youngsters or veterans. Together, he and Frank worked together to produce 26 goals one way or another. And Frank, like he tried with Stamkowski and Papin in Toronto, was able to help a youngster, this time rookie Guy Lafleur, in a big way in his rookie year, assisting on pretty much half of Guy's 29 goals. Together, they produced 30! Oh! Frank is no stranger to communicating well with his defense to produce oncoming offensive rushes. He and J.C. Tremblay collaborated on 9 assists together. He also had good chemistry with the likes of Jacques Laperriere and Guy Lapointe. Frank was often shifted as well, with the Roadrunner, Yvan Cornway, teaming up for 19 goals, and brother Pete Mahovlich teaming up for 26 goals. Incredible. Frank's 96 points was 6th best in the entire NHL for the 1971-72 season, making it the 6th time in his career where he finished among the top 10 in league scoring, doing so 3 times with the Leafs, and plus the 2 full seasons he played in Detroit, and now for the first time in his first full season in Montreal. Frank made the top 10 in even strength goals with 25, and a 5-way tie for 9th in the league with Paul Henderson, Bill Goldsworthy, Rick Martin, and former teammate Jim Papin. And Frank was amazing on the Montreal power play, which was 2nd best in the league, tied for 5th with 14 power play goals in the NHL. He was tied with former Red Wings teammate Gary Unger, now playing for the Blues. And look at this, on the other side of the special teams, 4 shorthanded goals, tied for 4th best in the league, along with brother Pete, Bobby Orr, Bill Fairbairn, and Jim Johnson. And just 1 behind teammates Jimmy Roberts, as the Habs had the 4th best penalty kill in the league. Despite all of this, Frank Mahovlich didn't garner 1 singular award vote, and didn't make any year-end All-Star team, but be that as it may, he did tie the Habs franchise record for points in his season, and played his 1,000th game, and was in the top 10 for even strength power play and short-handed goals. Unbelievable. He also showed at 34 years old, having the best season of his career in terms of statistics, he showed he's still among the game's best. There's no question now that after 15 seasons, Frank Mahovlich is a bona fide legend, an all-time great, but there's still more to come. Going into the 1972-73 season, Frank's confidence is riding high, as history has dictated in the last 20 years at this point that the Habs may be down, but far from out. However, Frank was about to embark on a journey joining a team that would change the face of hockey internationally forever. Indeed, Frank would participate in the 1972 Summit Series, an 8-game exhibition showdown with the Soviet national team, who has dominated international hockey, but according to many, only because Canada can't send their best to play against them. Well, now they have that chance. What was supposed to be just a simple series of exhibition games would turn into global ice hockey warfare. Frank was named alternate captain and was one of 6 members of the Montreal Canadiens to be selected, along with brother Pete, Yvan Cornway, defenseman Savard Lapointe, and goaltender Ken Dryden. Also former Leafs teammate Ron Ellis, and one of the men that Leafs traded him for, Paul Henderson, were on this club. Frank will play 6 out of the 8 games in the infamous series, which Canada won with a 4-3-1 record. He assisted on the opening goal of the series just 30 seconds in Game 1 at the Forum. That was before the Sylvias throttled them and shocked the world with a 7-3 win. However, he did score a huge goal in the second game at a familiar terrain of Maple Leaf Gardens in a 4-1 Canada win. Once the series was over, it was back to business, as the landscape of the game was still changing. Going into the 1972-73 season, the league expanded now to 16 teams, as the NHL saw the arrival of the Atlanta Flames and New York Islanders to the league. And to top it off, the international game changing and continuing expanding of the NHL, a new rival pro hockey league was born, the WHA, the World Hockey Association, was conceived for the 72-73 season and shook the foundation of the game, luring away one of the NHL's biggest stars, Bobby Hull. Also, the Habs took a hit on defense in the loss of star J.C. Tremblay, who defected to WHA, meaning they'd have to count on Bob Murdoch a little more. But in the midst of all this, Frank was determined to help bring the cup back to Montreal once again. Frank started the season well, with 9 points in 11 games, including getting a measure of revenge against the Rangers in a 6-1 win, notching 2 helpers, and then a goal and an assist and a tie against the Blues, his goal coming with 59 seconds to play to tie the game. Not a bad start. But in November, he was a machine. He began the month with an assist in the Habs' dominant win over the Pens. The very next game gave a rude welcome to the Atlanta Flames in the Omni, a goal, 2 assists, 3 points in a 6-1 win, and indeed was the first star of that game. Then he scored a goal in a loss to the Wings, but had better luck against his other former team with an assist, setting up Brother Pete for a goal and a big win over the Leafs. And then followed that up with 2 goals and a win over the Kings, where he was the second star of that game, and then scored a goal against the Bruins in a huge 5-3 win, handling the defending Stanley Cup champions their first loss of the year after being unbeaten in 16 games. Frank kindly welcomed the New York Islanders to the league with a goal and 2 assists for 3 points, follows up with another 3-point night, setting up goals for Lapointe, Lemaire, and Roberts, 3 apples, and a 6-5 win over Bobby Clarke and the Rising Flyers. He had an assist each in a loss to the Hawks and a tie with the Kings, but then had a monster of a game, 2 goals, an assist for 3 points in the win over the Canucks, 9-1 I might add. The Habs were rolling, 8 goals, 12 assists, 20 points in 11 games in November, but will go pointless in the final 2 games of the month, but the ageless wonder is steamrolling his way through this season. December, however, was not a great month for Frank following what he accomplished in November. 10 points in 13 games, it's still good, but a pretty bad -4. He did have 2 goals and a helper for 3 points in a win over the Pronovo and the Penguins in a game broadcast on Hockey Night in Canada on December 23rd. But it was a very happy new year for Frank. 10 goals, 9 assists for 19 points in just 13 games, and an incredible +17. First, it was a goal and 2 assists and an 8-4 win over the Leafs. He followed that with an assist and a shutout win over the Seals, then a goal and a tie over the Stars, but 2 days later had 2 goals on the road against the same Stars team in a 6-0 win, and 2 days later after that, well, had to settle for a tie against the lowly Seals, but Frank was in on all 3 Habs goals with a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. 2 days later, the game-winning goal and a shutout win over the Canucks. Then it was a home-and-home series with the Penguins. Frank went pointless in the win at home, in a comeback win over the Flyers. Frank assisted a tying goal that led to the eventual 6-3 win. He had a goal and assist over a surprisingly decent expansion Flames club, 2 assists against a shockingly atrocious expansion Islanders club, and then scored a shorthanded goal against the Leafs in a huge nationally televised game where the Habs won 4-2. The Habs' hot streak, however, came to an end, as did Frank's, in a loss to Detroit on the 28th. Then the 1973 NHL All-Star Game took place on January 30th in the Big Apple, Madison Square Garden. Frank was one of 5 Montreal Canadiens players selected, as he played in his 14th consecutive and overall All-Star Game, as Lemaire makes his 2nd appearance, Cornway with his 4th, and Serge Savard makes his 2nd, Guy Lapointe making his 1st. With time winding down in the 2nd period and the game tied 1-1, Frank made a great individual effort, scored to make it 2-1 for the East. In the 3rd period, he and Lapointe set up Lemaire to make it 4-2 and route to a 5-4 East win. Frank was named 2nd star of the game, but would lose his chance for a 3rd MVP award to Craig Wallace of the Pittsburgh Penguins, representing the West. He had 2 goals. But it didn't matter, as Frank had bigger fish to fry as the Habs returned to action on February 1st. The Big M had a goal and a helper and a tie against the Bruins, including assisting on Cornway's tying goal with exactly 1 minute remaining. He continued his good fortune on February the 3rd as the Habs visit the LA Kings. Early in the game, he set up young defenseman and caller for the minors by the name of Larry Robinson for his first career goal, first of 207 he'd score as a matter of fact. To open the scoring, 46 seconds into the 2nd period, Mahovlich then scored his 27th goal of the season, matching a number again he has proudly worn throughout his career to give the Habs a 3-0 lead, while he and Lapointe set up Murray Wilson to make it 6-0 en route to a 7-1 win. Frank named 2nd star of the game. He's playing very well in February, and the Habs look downright unstoppable as a whole, as they were dominating the league despite stiff competition from the Bruins and the Rangers. But then on February 17, 1973, on a stage Frank thrived on a lot throughout his career, especially in Toronto, and in the time now spent with the Habs, Hockey Night in Canada, CBC. Montreal's hosting a very talented Philadelphia Flyers club, led by a man deemed the best all-around forward in the league, Bobby Clarke. But there was a huge reason why this game was so important. Frank had moved his way to 8th all-time in scoring in NHL history. Yes, only 7 players have reached 1,000 career points at this point in the history of the league. Of course, all-time leader was one of his former teammates, Mr. Hockey Gordie Howe. Then he had Alex Delvecchio. Another former teammate and line mate of Frank's was 2nd all-time, and still playing in the NHL no less. While Jean Beliveau, again Frank's teammate here in Montreal after the trade in 1971. And 3rd, you had Bobby Hull, probably the only left winger that was better than Frank in this era, stood at number 4th. The man who was the principal of the Toronto-Detroit trade for Frank, Normie Ullman, was 5th all-time, still playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, while Stan Mikita of the Hawks, John Busick of the Bruins had reached the millennium mark this season. The Habs were down 3-0 after the first period, but on a power play, Frank got the puck back to Lapointe, who got it to Savard, who knocked it home, career point number 999 for the Big M. Habs closed the gap to 6-5 in the 3rd period. It's a power play. Frank is in control again, and he gets it to Lapointe and sets a rookie steep shot for a goal, and that gives Frank Mahovlich his 1,000th career point, his 1,094th career game in his 16th NHL season. Through it all, Frank Mahovlich is among the all-time leading scorers in NHL history, and while he's at it, he's still playing some of the best hockey of his career. And he didn't get the respect, however, throughout a lot of his career that he deserved, as some of the other 7 players seemed to get, but there was no disputing it whatsoever. Frank Mahovlich is a legend. The Habs would lose, however, in this game, but they picked themselves back up right away. Frank had 5 goals and 12 assists for 17 points in the month of February, and an excellent plus 13 in 13 games. In March, Frank continued to play very well, as did the Habs, but then came another important game for our hero. March 21st, 1973, Montreal was hosting a lowly Vancouver Canucks team led by Dale Talon. This club was not growing like their 1970 expansion counterparts, the Sabres. This should be an easy win for the Habs, but here's why it's an important game for Frank Mahovlich. As if being one of the all-time point leaders wasn't enough, Frank was going into this game 5th all-time in goals, with 499. Only 4 players in NHL history at this time had reached 500. Gordie Howe, of course, all-time leader at this point, was 786, while Bobby Hull looked like he could actually give Mr. Hockey a run for his money before defecting to the WHA, while the Habs icons Rocket Richard and Jean Beliveau sat at 3 and 4, respectively. Frank knows 2 of those men as well as former teammates and idolized the Rocket, and always looked as the, quote, 2nd best left winger next to Bobby, something that Leaf fans like to remind him about. The game was a much tighter affair than many thought, and it was 2-2 after 2. But just 1:27 into the 3rd period, Guy Lapointe gets the rush going. The pocket rocket Henri Richard sets up Frank Mahovlich, who nudges it past Canucks goaltender Dunk Wilson in a journey that began on March 24, 1957, almost 16 years to the day, scoring the legendary Glenn Hall, no less, culminates, scoring on a little-known trivia question, Dunk Wilson, as the foreign crowd cheers loud and proud for Frank reaching this mark, just the 5th player, again, in NHL history at this point, in March 21st, 1973, to reach that amazing milestone. Another exclamation point that his naysayers will just have to deal with. Frank followed that up with a pair of incredible performances. First, an 11-4 bombardment of the St. Louis Blues, featuring Frank scoring a goal that put the Habs ahead to stay, and then setting a fan favorite grinder, Jimmy Roberts, for 2 goals in this game. 3-point night, and then another monster 3-point night the next game. 3 assists setting up Guy Lafleur, 2 for Brother Pete, and a 6-5 loss to Chicago. But then the Habs rebounded as Frank scored the game winner the very next game against Chicago, this time at home, had a goal and an assist to go with it. He finished the month of March into 1 game in April with 18 points in 15 games and a plus 10. The Montreal Canadiens finished 52, 10, and 16 for 120 points, only second behind the 70-71 Bruins as the best regular season in NHL history. Yeah, so it's pretty safe to say it's playoff time. And now we see the birth of a new playoff rivalry, as in the opening round, the Montreal Canadiens would take on the NHL's new sensations, the Buffalo Sabres, making their first ever playoff appearance in their 3rd season. The Sabres were built by a man, again, Frank knows too well, Punch Imlach. He was their GM and brought the right players for head coach Joe Crozier to guide. The team finished 37, 27, and 14 for 88 points, barely edging out the Red Wings for a playoff spot. The Habs went 2-1-2 against the Sabres this season, who were highly competitive against them in many games. And of course, if we're talking Buffalo in the 1970s, we are talking the French Connection line. And the man leading it was Buffalo's first overall pick, Gilbert Perreault at center. He had been very good in his rookie and sophomore season, but continued to ascend further and grew as a forward and star player. 28 goals, 60 assists, 88 points, and winning the Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship. Perreault was Buffalo's first poster boy and more than lived up to expectations, and came in 5th in Hart Trophy voting as league MVP. He was 5th in assists, tied for 3rd in game-winning goals, an incredible season for the young 22-year-old center. On the right wing, Rene Robert in his first season with the Sabres after the Leafs and Penguins idiotically gave up on him. He had a breakout season with 40 goals, tied for 9th in the league, and tied for 6th in even-strength goals, and at 24 is just getting into his best years. And on the left wing, Rick Martin, 37 goals, 36 assists, 73 points, and just in his second season, about to turn 22. This is a young, exciting forward line who has all the right tools to be highly successful. And they also have tremendous talent, such as Jerry Meehan, who had 31 goals, another talented scoring forward in Jim Lawrence, and they had plenty of other talent as well, including their top penalty killer, Don Luch, as well as one of the best grinders in the game, Craig Ramsey. Leading the way on defense, a man Frank was very familiar with, his former teammate in Toronto, Tim Horton. Yes, at age 43 and in his 21st NHL season, was still tough as ever and providing amazing leadership for this young club, helping them grow. And the other defensemen in the game were responding, such as Jim Schoenfeld, who got some votes for the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie. A reliable journeyman and a former teammate of Frank's in Toronto as well, Larry Hillman, also brought veteran depth to the blue line. Rounding out this core was Mike Robitaille and Tracy Pratt. In net, they had Roger Crozier, who was racking up some good numbers. Again, another former teammate of Frank's, this one from Detroit, with a 23, 13, and 7 record, a good 2.76 goals against average, and a .905 save percentage, racking up 3 shutouts. And backing him up was Dave Dryden, yes, the brother of Ken. So here we go. Game 1 at the Montreal Forum, it's the brothers Dryden in a showdown, and they deliver. Frank was heavily contained in this game, however, but Cornway scored a power play goal early in the third that proved to be the game winner in a tight 2-1 win. Game 2, the Habs fell behind 2-0, and our hero was not playing overly well early on. The Habs, however, stunned Buffalo and took a 4-2 lead. Well, then late in the second period, the Big M got it to the Roadrunner, to Jacques, no nickname Lemaire, yeah, that's right, who scores the Habs led 5-2 after 2. Then early in the third period, Frank to Ivan, and Mimi, he scores 6-2. Now Savard leads the way, and Frank gets it again, sets up Cornway once again, 3 apples for Mahovlich. The Habs win 7-3 and take a 2-0 series lead. Game 3, the first ever playoff game at the Odd in Buffalo, and the Habs are looking sharp. But the Sabres were still in it as Montreal had a 3-2 lead, and then Bouchard sends in Frank on goal. He scores! The Habs go on to win 5-2, take a commanding 3-0 series lead on the verge of sweeping this upstart club. Game 4, however, the Habs get too far ahead of themselves, and the Sabres made them pay. A 5-1 win for them. Frank plays awful on -3. Game 5, our hero and the Habs try to refocus and finish this thing. Late in the first period, LaPerriere sends to the Big M to score a big goal. The Habs led 1-0 after 1. The Sabres had a 2-1 lead, however, in the third period, and it was rolling on. But LaPointe tied it. We go to OT, and midway through, Rene Robert sinks the Habs and cut the series lead to 3-2. What is happening here? Oh man, there's been no comeback from a 3-0 series deficit since 1942. Anyway, Game 6 in Buffalo, Frank was going to help make sure that didn't happen. As a little M to the Big M to Serge and Serge. 1:32 into the game, and the Habs never looked back. Took a 4-0 lead after 1 and carried it into the third and won 4-2, and winning the series with the same margin in 6 games. Other than his awful performance in Game 4, Frank played well most of the series, and played well with his 3 assists in Game 2, and overall had 6 points in 6 games in his quarterfinal series. But perhaps the Habs took the Sabres a little too lightly. Well, they best not make this mistake in the next round. And indeed, awaiting them in the semifinal is the Philadelphia Flyers, who were even better than their good 37-30-11 regular season record might suggest. And also in the 5 meetings between these two, the series was tied with a 2-2-1 record on each side. The Flyers were guided by Freddie the Fog, aka Fred Shero, behind the bench, who was building an aggressive bad boy bunch soon to be proudly known as the Broad Street Bullies. The Flyers just beat the North Stars in 6 games, and they had the right man leading the way. And that, of course, was the superb icon known as Bob, aka Bobby Clarke. He'd been emerging as a star since entering the league in 1969 as one of the most strategic players, the way he would play the game and could follow a rush and help command one. He had a career year, 37 goals, 67 assists, 104 points, second in league scoring, also third in assists. He ended up winning his first Hart Trophy as league MVP, as well as the Pearson Trophy as Player's Choice for MVP. He was named a team All-Star, of course, for the first time, winning second team honors, which was kind of puzzling. The Flyers were building around him, and at least they were showing some bigger results. But Clark wasn't the only superb center they had. Rick McLeish had a huge breakout season, 50 notches, 50 apples, 100 points, fourth in league scoring behind teammate Clark, third in league in goals, and his 21 power play goals were best in the league. A pure skater with a sniper-like shot, McLeish was going to be an asset to this club for years going forward. Now the plethora of talented scoring forwards continued, with towering winger Cowboy Bill Flett, acquired from the Kings last season. His first full season with the Flyers notches a monster career high, 43 goals, beating his previous best mark of 26. He was fifth in the league in goals, tied for third in shorthanded goals, and tied for eighth in power play goals. But it don't end with these three. Bill Barber in his rookie year scored 30 goals and was a runner-up for the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie. Gary Dornhofer also had 30 goals. Ross Lomberry reached 21. Also character players such as Simon Nole, Bill Clement lent a big hand, and resident bullies Bob Kelly, Don Selesky, and the Hammer, Dave Schultz, rounded out the forward core. On defense, they had a growing group, and one of the big standouts was Joe Watson, who was a plus 30, threw in 26 points, including 24 assists, and joining him was the underrated Tom Bladden, who was their best scoring defenseman, and the vicious man known as Moose Andre Dupont, who the Flyers got in the steal of a deal from the Blues. Also the bruiser and one of the most popular players on the team, Barry Ashby, as well as seasoned vet Wayne Hillman, and leader Ed Van Imp. A very brutal, violent core indeed, and in net, no, it's not who you might think. Matter of fact, it was Doug Favell, who was a very talented goaltender, and was the Flyers' best during the season when, as an aspect of their game, was one of their weaker points in net. He was 20, 15, and 4 with a good 2.83 goals against average, but an excellent .916 save percentage, which was third best in the league, and notched 3 shutouts. So he, of course, will be the guy they're going to go with in this series. So here we go. Game 1, our hero does not play well. He's a -3. His defensive game is non-existent. It's tied 4-4 to regulation. And close to 3 minutes in OT, Rick McLeish silences the foreign crowd, studying the Habs the big upset in Game 1. Game 2, however, Frank is a lot more motivated. The Habs find themselves down 2-0 in the first period. What is happening here? On the power play, it's the big M to the little M to the flower. The Habs are in this thing. They trail 2-1 after 1. The game was tied 3-3 after regulation and 6-4-5 into overtime. Larry Robinson scores the overtime winner, sending the Forum into a frenzy. As the series is tied 1-1, Frank played much better overall here. Game 3, the city of brotherly love, and the Habs were leading 1-0. Murdoch gets to the big M, who gets to the pocket rocket, who scores, and the Habs lead 2-0. The Flyers got one back, but the Habs' defensive game and Dryden's goaltending keep them in it. They win it 2-1 and lead the series by the same margin. Game 4, the Habs led 2-1 in the second, and Dryden is insane in net, much like he was 2 years prior. But on the power play, Tick Frank Taklamer Doivan, it's a goal. The Habs were clinging to a 3-1 lead with time winding down. And Frank, however, with a loose puck, 33 seconds left, launched it into the empty net. A great game for our hero. Habs win it 4-1, had the Flyers on the verge of elimination. Game 5, back at the Montreal Forum. The Flyers are highly competitive and trying to save their season. It's a seesaw battle. It was tied 2-2 after 2, but Fleck gave the Flyers the lead and the go-ahead marker 5.5 minutes into the third period. But literally just 14 seconds later, Lepoint sends out Frank Mahovlich perfectly. Goal! The game is tied 3-3. And with under 8 minutes to play, it's Frank to Serge to Henry. Montreal led 4-3 just over a minute and a half later. Cornway scores 5-3 Habs. Countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Frank Mahovlich going back to the big dance, baby. The Montreal Canadiens are going to the Stanley Cup for the 7th time in 9 seasons. Frank's stats were, oh my goodness, the exact same as they were in the Buffalo series. Only this time he led the entire series in scoring, as despite a bad Game 1, he came alive and consistently delivered on all ends of the ice. What a showing once again as he looks for a Stanley Cup ring yet again to grace his finger. Well, here we are. For Frank Mahovlich, this will be his 8th appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals. In his previous 7, won his last 5, not having lost since being with the Leafs in 1960. He knows the pressure the big game brings. He knows the glory and the thrill of a win. It has been 13 long years since knowing the agony of defeat, likely having forgotten it at this point. But either way, he will be motivated, he'll be determined, and he'll be ready for whatever comes his way. And awaiting them, a familiar foe. The team they beat 2 years prior, the Chicago Blackhawks, are back at it, hoping to win their first Stanley Cup in 12 years after losing their last 3 appearances. As a matter of fact, the Hawks finished a very impressive 42-27-9 for 93 points. Head coach Billy Ray still looking for that first Stanley Cup ring as a coach. And to get here, they took out the Blues in 5 games and beat the powerful Rangers also in 5. The Hawks also won the season series against the Habs 3-2-0 and beat the Montreal more than anyone did this season. So this could very well be their time. Bobby Hull may be gone, but Stan Mikita isn't. In his 14th NHL season, he did miss 21 games, but still scored a huge 83 points in the 57 he played, playing in his 7th NHL All-Star game, and also finished 7th in Hart Trophy voting as league MVP, and again, he is the man leading the way in more ways than one. Dennis Hull emerged with a star-making season as he was a second-team All-Star and notched 31 goals, 59 assists for 90 points, and was tied for 6th in even strength goals and was 3rd in game-winning goals. And Frank's former Leaf teammate Jim Pappen has become a major part of the Hawks as he led the team in scoring overall with 41 goals, 51 assists for 92 points, and was 10th in the entire league in scoring, and 5th in even strength goals. Also, Pip Martin reached 90 points this season, while Cliff Corral notched 30 goals, running out the talented core Louis Gotti, Chico Mackey, former Habs star Ralph Backstrom, and JP Bordelot. Their defense was rock solid, and Bill White was the main reason for that this season. A towering and imposing presence on the ice, gave a lot offensively with 38 assists. Overall had 47 points. It was a big plus 32. He was a finalist for the Norris Trophy as the league's top defenseman. Pat Stapleton had another tremendous season on the blue line, as did Phil Russell, Doug Jarrett, Dick Redmond to do their part, but Keith Magnuson is out with an injury. And the man backstopping it all, who else? Tony Esposito, still one of the best netminders in the game, 32 wins. Only one behind league leader, Ken Dryden. His 2.52 goals against average, 3rd in the league. His .917 save percentage, 2nd again, only to Dryden. And got himself 4 goose eggs, yes, that's shutouts, and a second-team All-Star. This is shaping up to be as exciting as the 71 final, so here we go. Game 1, the Montreal form. It looked bad early. The Hawks shocked Dryden early and took a 2-0 lead, 1:02 into the game. However, they tied it with trail 3-2 after 1. The Habs, however, were leading 4-3 in the 3rd period. Then power play. Brother Pete, brother Frank, set up cousin Jacques. Well, okay, he's not really their cousin, but he scored a goal. And the Habs led 5-3. After Petey gets a shorthanded goal, Lahula gets it to Lafleur, who sets up Frank, baby. His 5th goal of these playoffs. The Habs lead 7-3 and take game 1 8-3. Wow. Game 2, Montreal's defense is on point thanks to rookie Larry Robinson. With the game tied 1-1 in the 2nd period, the Big M to the Roadrunner, and the Coyote can't catch him as the Habs led 2-1. They lead 3-1 in the 3rd period, and with the empty net, Frank seals the deal. Back-to-back, one goal, 1 assist, 2-point games for our hero, and the Habs lead the Stanley Cup final 2 games to none. Game 3, we shift to Chicago Stadium. Fans are ruckus, however, in the Windy City. Chicago led 5-0 in the 2nd period, but then it's Big Bird Larry to Little M Pete to Big M Frank for the goal. The Habs are on the board. It looked like the Habs are on the verge of a miracle comeback as Cronway closed the gap to 5-2 in the 3rd period, and LaRose gets it to Frank, who sits up a la point. The Habs trail by 2. Lemaire closed the gap to a goal. 46 seconds later, do you believe in miracles? Well, yes, I do, but it didn't happen on this night. Habs lose 7-4. Hawks are still in it, but Frank now has 3 straight 2-point games. Game 4, however, Montreal regains their focus. Dryden gets a big shutout, and the blue line core is rock solid. Frank's point streak comes to an end, but Lemaire, LaRose, Ivan, and Tardif each notch 2 points in the 4-0 win. Our hero and the Habs are 1 win away from more Stanley Cup glory. Game 5, back at the farm, the fans are ready to watch the Habs raise the cup for the 18th time in their glorious history. And to start the game, 2:47 in, Frank scoops a loose puck, he goes in Antonio, and it's a goal. Mahovlich, yes. But the Hawks took a 2-1 lead, but then a power play late in the frame. Larry, Frank, Peter, the latter of the 3 scores. The game is tied 2-2 after 1. After a wild 2nd period, the Habs trailed 7-5. It was 8-6 just past the midway point of the period, and the 2 vets, Frank Mahovlich to Henry Richard, and the latter scored. The Habs trail by 1. They press for the equalizer, but suffer an 8-7 loss as the Hawks refuse to lose despite a big 3-point night from Frank Mahovlich. Game 6 back at Chicago Stadium. The Habs trail 2-0, but like the last game, Frank to Henry, he scores. The Habs trail 2-1 after 1. In the second period, they take a 3-2 lead, but the Hawks tie it. But then power play started by Cornway to Lapointe and finished by Frank. Yes, the Habs led 4-3, but it was tied 4-4 after 2. Cornway scores his record 15th goal these playoffs. Tardive notches a power play marker. The Habs led 6-4, and the time is counting down. He can already see his name etched on that oh-so-holy grail for a 6x5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1. It's the final countdown. 0. Yes, Frank Mahovlich, Stanley Cup number 6. He was just unstoppable in this final. 5 goals, 6 assists, 4 2-point games, one of them a 3-point game, 11 points in the finals. Oh my goodness. Nearly 2 points a game. That was still only 3rd best on the team, if you can believe it. This was the highest scoring Stanley Cup final in NHL history at this point. Either way, Frank now has half a dozen championships to his name, and once again played like a warrior in these finals, as he has many times. Frank Mahovlich's 23 points was 3rd best of the playoffs, just a point behind Dennis Hull, the Hawks, and 2 points behind the man who would win the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP, teammate Evan Cornway. The Big M and the Roadrunner made a great team in these playoffs. Once again, Frank's postseason savvy on full display and a result in championship success. Ageless wonder indeed. Frank Mahovlich scored 38 goals, 55 assists for 93 points, just 3 points less than his career high set the year prior. A lot of crazy and wild combinations among this Hall of Fame Habs team as they were working together. First off, Frank's brother, Pete, set up his bigger M 11 times, and together they worked together to produce 21 overall goals. 17, count them, 17 different players were on the receiving end of an assist for Frank Mahovlich, but the one who benefited the most was Jacques Lemaire, as they were huge in the power play together, along with defenseman Guy Lapointe. Frank set up Jacques 9 times, together they produced 17 goals overall. His main assist collaborator, out of 15 different players, was team captain Henry Richard. They produced 7 assists together and actually worked together a lot late in the season as well as into the playoffs. Also, as I mentioned, Guy Lapointe was a big part of Frank's season, as was grinding forward veteran Jimmy Roberts. They produced 18 goals together. Also, he and Cornway worked a lot on the power play, and as well as the postseason created some pure magic. Frank's 93 points tied him for 7th best in the league, scoring along with the man who Montreal parted ways with him for, Mickey Redmond of the Red Wings, as well as another ageless wonder, John Busick of the Bruins. This is the 7th time in 16 seasons he has finished among the top 10 in league scoring, and at the age of 35 is the 2nd oldest on the list next to Busick. And in another category, Frank finds himself in the top 10. That's plus-minus, finishing 8th with his plus 42. This is the 2nd time since it's been an official stat he's been in the top 10. Also did it as an unofficial stat twice, totaling 4 times. Many Habs made this list, as you can see, as well as Cornway and Lemaire, and the Stanley Cup defensive core of Savard, Lapointe, and NHL's leader in this category, Jacques Laperriere. And take a look at this. In his 16th season, for the first time in 10 years, Frank Mahovlich is a first-team All-Star. Last time he achieved this was indeed 1963 with the Leafs. This is the 3rd time in his career he has made this mark. However, combining his 6 second-team All-Star selections, he now has 9 total. A huge achievement. As this man's marvelous career, even after 16 seasons, knows no bounds. He becomes the first player ever in NHL history to be named a team All-Star on either side with 3 different clubs to boot. And teammates joining him in this category are Guy Lapointe, who had an incredible season, and goaltender Ken Dryden. Can Frank Mahovlich be stopped even at this point in his career? Maybe with the right team around him and the environment his skills can thrive in the game changing, he's adapting to it in new ways, making him all the more dangerous. And of course, to top it off, those all-time great accomplishments of Stanley Cup number 6, that's what makes the fact that he scored his 1,000th point, only the 8th player to do so at the time, and a month later scoring his 500th goal, just the 5th to do so at the time, all the more sweeter. He began the year playing in an exhibition series that changed the face of the game, and ended it with the biggest prize in the game, yet again. So now, Frank Mahovlich, after proving he's still among the best in the game at 35 years old, is about to enter his 17th NHL season, his 4th with the Habs and 3rd full season with them. He looked, not just as a starting more, but as a leader. He provides class. He still has that same passion for the game he had in his rookie year in Toronto. Sure, there were some who wondered how much more Frank had to offer. That happens with any athlete when they get to a certain age, no matter how good they are. But his confidence was riding high yet again. The Habs themselves were bracing for some huge changes. Habs shockingly parted with Bob Murdoch to the Kings, trade for a first-round draft pick, and while that draft pick ended up being Mario Tremblay, they still lose a key defenseman for this year. But still have a strong overall core, and this opens up more of a door for sophomore Larry Robinson. But the allure of the WHA hit the Habs yet again as Ray Jean-Noël, one of the team's top checking forwards, and Mark Tardif, a very talented scoring forward, departed to the rival hockey league. But the biggest hit would be goaltender Ken Dryden, who was unhappy with his contractual situation at Montreal, was set to hold out for the whole year and complete his law degree, and had to rely on Wayne Thomas and Bunny LaRocque. Habs still had a very strong team, but getting back to the Stanley Cup would be a tough task. But what can our hero do to try to help? Let's find out. And he got off to a good start, 8 points in 8 games in October, and in the second game of the year, half that total was in a win over the Vancouver Canucks with a goal and 3 assists for 4 points on October 27th against the Stars, had a goal and a helper but also suffered an injury, would miss 6 games. But he returned on November 14th, notching a goal and an assist against Boston. Then the very next game on the 17th, scored a goal and 2 assists for 3 points in a win over Buffalo. In the 7 games he played in November, he had 4 goals, 6 assists for 10 points. In December, Frank notched 11 points in 12 games, and on December 8th, in a game against the Islanders, he had 3 helpers, and a week later had a goal, an assist, and a win over the Kings. He also scored the game-winning goal against the Seals the next game. The Habs were looking pretty sharp despite their big changes. In the new year, Frank's luck against the Islanders continued with a goal and a helper and a win. But in a huge game in Boston, the Habs took on the mighty Bruins, and Frank was a Terminator out there. First, he helped set up Lemaire to give them a 2-0 lead, then scored a goal to make it 3-0. When the Habs were leading 4-2, the Flower and the younger Mahovlich set him up for the second goal of the game, and Frank returned the favor to beat, setting him up 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, first star of the game, and studying Orr, Espo, and company. And he also had a goal and a helper against the Sabres on the 24th. In the end of the month with 12 points in 12 games was a -3, however. But either way, to end the month, Frank Mahovlich was going to play his 15th consecutive and overall NHL All-Star game. Joining him was sophomore Larry Robinson, playing what would be his first of 10 in his illustrious career, and playing in his first NHL All-Star game in 7 years, and the 10th of his Hall of Fame career, Henri Richard. And while Yvan Cournoyer makes his 5th All-Star appearance, Frank actually scored the opening goal of the game, assisted by Cournoyer, but the East would lose 6-4. In February, our hero was still showing at the age of 36 he's an elite NHL forward. 2 assists over the Wings in a win, a goal and assist in a dominant win over the Rangers, 2 goals and assists for 3 points in another win over the Wings, and he did have an assist against the Canucks on a day that's notable, February 21st, where Frank sadly dealt the news that former longtime teammate Tim Horton was tragically killed in a car accident at the age of 44. Frank, however, tried to surge forward, 2 assists with a tie with the Kings. Also had 2 assists in a win over Jean Pronovost and the Penguins. 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points in 15 games, a huge +9 in February. And the Habs were looking like they could repeat as champions. To start March, however, the Habs went on a 3-game losing streak. 2 of those games, he notched 2 assists against the Seals and a goal and a helper against the Rangers. However, to break the streak, he scored the game winner against the Rangers. 2 games later, on March 13, 1974, taking on the Chicago Blackhawks at Chicago Stadium, just 1:49 into the game, he scores his 23rd goal of the year. The Hawks led 3-1 after 2 periods. Time was winding down. It looked like the Habs were going to take the L here, but it was just under 6 minutes ago. Jimmy Roberts sets up the Big M. The Habs are still in it at 50 seconds of play. The Flower blues into the Big M, who helps launch the puck at Rockets goal. Habs fight to a 3-3 tie in on all 3 goals. 2 goals and assists was the game's first star for his big night, considering the fact that he was able to lead the Habs to the comeback to get to this point. He notched 1 assist in the next 3 games, each that is, and then in a win over the Blues, had a goal and an assist. 2 games later, had 2 assists against the Canucks in a win, including on Cournoyer's game winner with 2:51 to play. 2 games later, scored an insurance marker against the Kings. And then on April 3rd, 1974, the Montreal Canadiens would host the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like I said, the team, of course, Frank became the star among fickle fans for 11 seasons. This would be his last game against his former team. And former teammates Dave Keon, Eddie Shack, and Ron Ellis were still present. So were the 2 men who were part of the trade that to part with him, Paul Henderson and Norm Ullman. And also there were new stars, Darryl Sittler and defenseman and rookie Boreas Salming. On a power play late in the first period, Lemaire to Lafleur to Mahovlich, the Habs led 1-0 after 1. The game was tied 2-2 in the third period, but then Frank made a great individual effort, scores his 2nd goal of the game. Habs led 3-2. But they'd fall apart and lost 5-3. Frank was still named first star of the game, while former teammate Keon was named second star. Either way, this closes a very important chapter in Frank's career. But then, there was the very next game. On April 6, 1974, the penultimate game of the regular season, the Habs are now hosting the Boston Bruins at the Montreal Forum, and the Bruins were the most dominant team in the league this year, having won 51 games. And of course, those all-time greats, Oren Espo, are still in their prime. Goaltender Gilbert of the Bruins and Larocque of the Habs are making some big saves. As the first period wound down, Pete to Guy to Frank. He scores. The Habs hold on to a 1-0 lead in intermission. The Bruins would tie it, but just past the midway point of the second period, Roberts gets it to Conway, and Frank scores in his 30th goal of the season, the 10th time in 17 seasons he has reached 30 goals. Wow, that puts the Habs ahead 2-1, and then with 1:05 left of the period, power play, Lapointe leads the way, and Frank Mahovlich scores the goal, his 31st of the year, 533rd of his career, and giving him his 14th career hat trick in the NHL. His first in just over 2 years, and his final. Habs would go on to win 6-2. Little did anyone know at the time that 533rd goal, of course, would be his final NHL goal, and also his 1103rd career point in his last. Indeed, 14 hat tricks, that's nothing to sneeze at. Frank is named the game's first star on the Great White North stage that is Hockey Night in Canada. Brother Pete was named the second star of the game, and future megastar Guy Lafleur is the third. On April 7, 1974, the very next day at Madison Square Garden, Frank played his 1181st and final NHL regular season game against the Rangers in a 6-4 loss. He was pointless and was an even 0 and had 4 shots on goal. Montreal finished 45-24-9 for 99 points, an excellent season, even if it wasn't as dominating as last year. And indeed, Frank aims for lucky number 7 when it comes to championships, as it is indeed playoff time. And the Habs encounter a team that put them out 2 years prior, the New York Rangers. The Rangers finished with a record of 40-24-14 for 94 points, just 5 behind the Habs. They were still coached and managed by Emile the Cap Francis. The Habs won the season series, however, 4-2-0, so they were ready for this club. However, they had many of the same elements that allowed them to beat Montreal 2 years prior. And again, that includes the other gentleman, Jean Rattel, 67 points in 68 games, still proven to be one of the best playmakers in the game. Also, someone Frank knew quite well in Toronto, Pete Stemkowski, been a huge part of this Rangers club, 25 goals, 45 assists, 70 points, providing a lot of depth up front. Vic Hadfield had 27 goals, was tied for 6th in the league with 12 power play goals, while Tkachuk had a really good season with 63 points and notched 3 shorthanded goals, and Steve Vickers scored 34 this season. But it was Rod Gilbert who was still the best all-around forward on this team, leading off forwards with 77 points, 36 goals, 41 assists, and was second in the NHL with 16 power play goals, only behind Mickey Redmond of Detroit. Bill Fairbairn, Bobby Rousseau, and fan favorite Ted Irvine helped round out this forward core. But the biggest star of the team was their star defenseman, Brad Park. 25 goals, 57 assists, 82 points, led his team in scoring, was tied for 9th in league scoring, and was a runner-up for the Norris Trophy thanks to that punk kid from Boston named Bobby, and got himself 3 votes for the Hart Trophy. Another huge year for Park. Joining him on the blue line was veteran Rod Sealing, Gilles Marot, Ron Harris, and Jim Nielsen. In goal, they were going with Eddie Giacomin, who was having some consistency issues, but regardless still notched 30 wins, which was 4th best in the league. His 3.07 goals against average was still good enough for 10th. His 5 shutouts were tied for 4th best in the league, tied with Dan Bouchard and Rocky Vachon. And this Rangers team has the elements they need, but the Habs are up to the task, and so is our hero. So here we go. Our hero is about to play in the 14th postseason of his career, and Game 1 in the Montreal Forum, it's not good. The Rangers are a cohesive unit and take the Habs down 4-1. Frank does not play well whatsoever, doesn't even register a single shot on goal. It's a -1. Game 2, however, the Habs reverse their fortunes to get themselves a 4-1 victory to even the series. Frank plays much better and is a +2, as last year's playoff MVP, Yvan Cornway, notches a hat trick and their defense is on point. The series shifts to the Big Apple for Game 3, and it's looking very good. Habs are leading 1-0 on a power play. Lemaire to Mahovlich to Stevie Shutt. Habs led 2-0. They go on to win 4-2 thanks to another big game from the Roadrunner, a 32-save performance from Larocque. Game 4, the Habs could take full control of this series. The game is tied 1-1 late in the first period, and another power play. Savard surges. Frankie then sets up Petey. It's a 2-1 Montreal lead after 1 period. Then less than 3 minutes into the second period, Jacques Yivancy to the Big M. His 51st career playoff goal makes it 3-1. But then the Habs fall apart. The Rangers take it 6-4. Frank's good game goes bad. Series is tied 2-2. We go back to La Belle Province. Game 5 at the Forum. Goaltender Jacob and LaRock looks solid. It's 2-2 after regulation. But Ron Harris puts the defending champions and our hero on the verge of elimination. Frank played pretty bad too. So here we go. Game 6. Habs and our hero fighting to save their season. The 137th playoff game of Frank's career looks good so far. Habs led 2-0 early in the second. They collapse again. They lose 5-2. Frank again is not a factor in this game. The Montreal Canadiens, for the second time in 3 seasons, are eliminated by the Rangers. Frank was not good in this series. Goal, 2 assists, 3 points, and a bad -4. Only brother Pete and Serge Savard were worse with a -5. Frank, who was an elite playoff performer, just didn't have it this year in what was to be his final Stanley Cup playoff series. The Rangers would go on to lose in a thrilling 7-game series to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, Philadelphia Flyers. In his 17th and final NHL season, Frank Mahovlich had 31 goals, 49 assists for 80 points in just 71 games. Very impressive numbers yet again for seasoned vet and bona fide legend. And he was working well, of course, with his fellow legends. Guy Lafleur set him up 9 times for 31 goals, as 13 different players set him up for goals. Frank, in return, set up 15 different players for goals, and mainly Yvan Cornway for 12, almost more than a quarter. Yeah, more than a quarter, actually, of the Roadrunners' 40 that year. And he teamed up with brother Pete for 9 assists. Also, the chemistry was still there with Henri Richard, Jacques Lemaire, and once again with grinder Jim Roberts. So Frank's final year in the NHL showed he still had a lot to give. For the 7th time in his career, he led his team in scoring. For the 10th time in his career, he reached 30 goals. He also played in his 15th straight NHL All-Star game. Finished a very good +16, and while he did miss 7 games, those were very early in the season, and still seemed healthy at the age of 36, and still very productive. But his impending departure from the Habs and the NHL will leave many scratching their heads. Be that as it may, not a terrible way to ride away. Frank's time in Montreal, despite being only 4 seasons, 3 of them full, etched his legacy in a town known for many legends as it is. Mahovlich in this era was one of the few non-homegrown talents to build a legacy in Montreal, bringing home 2 more Stanley Cups, getting himself a couple more rings, and played amazing in both wins, and even tied NHL record at the time with 27 playoff points. First team All-Star selection, first time in 10 years in 1973. The year prior, in 1972, he reached a career high in points, which also tied the Habs franchise record at the time of 96 points. Played in 4 more NHL All-Star games, was a +105 during his time in Montreal. 58 points in 49 playoff games. Twice more in his career, was in the top 10 among league scorers. He played in his 1,000th career game, getting an 8th player in NHL history to reach 1,000 career points, and the 5th player to reach 500 goals. But yeah, he has had trouble being uttered in the same sentence as the one who accomplished a lot of those marks before him, such as Howe, the Rocket, Makito, or fellow left-wing forward Bobby Hull. Now, before you started me saying, "Oh, Frank's not better than them," no, it's not the issue. As they use the cliche these days, the man deserves his flowers. Frank's best scoring years overall were with the Habs: 129 goals, 181 assists for 310 points in 263 games. Again, still effective in even strength goals, power play goals, plus-minus top 10 in 1973. He even was top 5 in short-handed goals. And he was selected to play for Team Canada in 1972 for the Summit Series, which again was supposed to be just a friendly exhibition, but changed the game as we know it. He truly was still an ageless wonder, but his decision to walk away with the NHL will not be stopped. Well, thankfully, time has been kinder to Frank Mahovlich, as his legacy has helped him go down in history of being acknowledged as one of the all-time greats in NHL history. And indeed, he is uttered in the same sense of many of his peers, even though we can debate all day whether he's better than them or not. But the point is, he deserves to be held in the same regard. 50 years after his NHL career ended, 6 Stanley Cups, and played in 8 total finals. 4 Cup wins with Toronto, 2 with the Habs. He had some brilliant performances in these playoffs. This record, 27 points in 1971, says a lot. His clutch heroics led him to getting his name on the Holy Grail yet again. 118 points in 137 career playoff games. Sadly, he was not acknowledged for the Hart Trophy all that much, but a 9-time Team All-Star selection, 3 first teams, 6 second teams. He was the first player in NHL history to be a Team All-Star with 3 different clubs. He kept setting team records wherever he went. Led the league in even strength goals twice. Was in the top 10 7 other times. On the power play, he was also brilliant, making the top 10 6 times, and was even in the top 5 in shorthanded goals once. He could even score those game winners, especially in Toronto, where he's in the top 10 in game-winning goals 3 times. He made the top 10 in plus-minus, unofficially twice, officially twice, totaling 4 times. Starting in 1959, ending in 1974, he played in all 15 NHL All-Star games between those times, and became the first player in NHL history to win the NHL All-Star Game MVP twice. Going back to where it all began, He was the NHL's Rookie of the Year in 1957-58. 533 goals, 570 assists, 1,103 points, and 1,181 games. He led the NHL as the 8th all-time leading scorer and 4th all-time in goals. And now you're probably thinking, well, Bill, you said this was a 4-part series. Well, yes, I did. Because Frank's career is not over. If you've been listening to me, I said his NHL career is over. I never said he was retiring. Yep. Even the Big M couldn't resist the allure of the big contract teams were handing out in the rival hockey association known as the World Hockey Association. As indeed, he's still at the top of his game, but now he's going to take that talent to the other guys. And to top it off, he's going back to the city and the building he's all too familiar with. That'll be part 4 of our series. And that does it for part 3, and wraps up the NHL portion of Frank Mahovlich's great career. Until next time, please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya!